Allowing players to tailor the level of difficulty to what's right for them means that a game should never become too hard for them to beat. However, it also means that harder challenges are there for those looking for some extra layers of punishment. Some games, however, take this perhaps too far, because I'm Si for WhatCulture.com, and here are 10 cruel difficulty modes you can't handle. Number 10, Hard Mode, Amnesia The Bunker. Set within the confines of a bunker during World War I, Frictional Games' Amnesia sequel tasks players with escaping the claustrophobic tunnels by locating pieces of an explosive to clear the rubble blocking the exit. But with a monstrous presence hunting protagonist Henry whenever the lights go out, doing so isn't easy. With only a handful of limited and randomly generated resources available in each playthrough, players are forced to experiment to overcome each challenge, all while staying quiet and keeping the generator topped up to keep the monster at bay. Even on its standard difficulty, the bunker is far from being an easy game. However, those wishing for an even more harrowing ordeal can play on hard mode. Described as an intense nightmare with unforgiving encounters, this mode puts players' wits to the test. Here, the focus on experimentation and creativity is amplified as resources are even scarcer than before. The monster is likewise made even more aggressive, with the slightest whirring of Henry's handheld flashlight being enough to draw the beast's attention straight to him. If that's not enough of a challenge, the developers plan to launch an even harder shell-shocked mode in the future. Number 9, 1999 mode, BioShock Infinite. Taking its name from the year that System Shock was released, 1999 mode is a homage to the biting challenge of old school games. Unlocked by either completing the game or by entering the famous Konami code, this setting is described in the game as a hardcore mode for the best of the best. Irrational Games creative director Ken Levine has likewise warned of the perils that players will face if they choose to play it, stating that this mode isn't for the average player. Alongside the increased damage output of enemies and the decreased amount of pain that protagonist Booker can withstand, this mode makes a handful of tweaks to ensure it's as tricky as possible. The navigation arrow and auto aim are removed, ammo is reduced, and respawning now costs more money, and when players can't afford the $100 it costs to revive, they're sent back to the main menu. More than just a harder difficulty setting, 1999 mode is like playing a completely different game. Number 8, Hardcore New York Minute, Max Payne 3. In addition to the regular difficulties players can choose from, the Max Payne series adds an optional layer of challenge with the New York Minute mode. Included in all 3 games, this arcade-like mode tasks players with finishing each level as fast as possible. More time can be earned by killing enemies and scoring headshots, but if the timer runs out or Max dies, it's game over. For the 3rd entry in the series, Rockstar Games upped the ante exponentially by adding a hardcore version of this mode, which is unlocked after beating regular New York Minute. Hardcore New York Minute plays out similarly to the original in that it puts players against the clock in each level. However, the hardcore variant comes with one major difference. Players must complete every level in one sitting, die or let the timer run out at any point, and they'll need to try again from the very beginning. And with 14 chapters in the game, finishing this mode will take up a huge chunk of time. Although the combat difficulty here is actually set to medium rather than hardcore, the endurance it takes to beat hardcore New York Minute is unprecedented. Number 7, Akumoo, The Evil Within and The Evil Within 2. The Evil Within games are home to taut survival horror action. From limited ammunition and tough enemies to even tougher boss fights, gruff protagonist Sebastian Castellanos has a rough time regardless of which difficulty these games are played on. For players who want an even harder challenge, they can opt to play either game on the notorious Akumoo mode after beating them once on any other difficulty. The Japanese word for nightmare, this setting is the ultimate in masochistic punishment. Alongside enemies being far stronger than in the regular difficulties and uncommon enemies appearing earlier in the game, resources are likewise much scarcer than before. Downed enemies even drop less of the vital green gel that's required for upgrades. The most unforgiving aspect about Akumoo though is that Sebastian will die in just a single hit, with even the smallest bit of damage sending players back to the last checkpoint. Playing on this ultra hard difficulty requires complete focus and a near flawless execution to make it all the way to the end credits. With hordes of extremely aggressive enemies and sneakily placed traps everywhere, avoiding damage in these games is an almost impossible task for only the boldest of players. Number 6, Rhythm Master, HiFi Rush. Despite its cast of colourful characters and hilarious writing, rhythm action game HiFi Rush can be incredibly challenging if players want it to be. Whereas the lower difficulties strike an enjoyable balance between challenge and fun by being more lenient when it comes to staying in time with the game's infectious beat, the harder difficulties are stricter with timing in addition to making enemies tougher. The greatest challenge is found within the Rhythm Master difficulty, which is only unlocked after beating the game. While enemies hit the hardest twist in this mode, as well as having bigger health and stun bars, the most taxing part of Rhythm Master is that it demands that players keep in perfect time with the beat. If the rhythm meter drops below rank C, it's an instant game over. Players need to be living metronomes if they aim to beat every stage. There's no margin for error in fights. Players need to time every attack, dodge and parry perfectly to keep the meter from falling to a D. Even in the brief moments between enemy waves, players will need to stop the gauge from dropping too much. As this mode's name suggests, complete mastery of the game is needed to succeed here. Number 5, Expert Plus, Guitar Hero Metallica. During the Guitar Hero craze that swept the mid-2000s, completing the likes of Through the Fire in the Flames and Raining Blood on Expert would be coveted like a badge of honour. But Guitar Hero Metallica dialed up the difficulty even more with the addition of an Expert Plus difficulty for drums. Only available on a selection of the game's tracks, players would need to be drumming virtuosos to make it to the end of any of these songs. The blistering tempo of metal anthems like Master of Puppets and One already made them exceedingly tricky to play on standard higher difficulties, but Expert Plus made things far more technically demanding by introducing extra bass drum hits. Whereas regular Expert difficulty would simplify more demanding parts by ignoring every other hit that was a 16th note or smaller, that's when there's 4 hits or more within a single beat, Expert Plus mode includes every single hit. The bass drum is so fast that players were recommended to use a second kick pedal for this mode. It's fair to say after mastering Expert Plus, players will have mastered the Regal drums. Number 4, Impossible Mode and New Game Plus, Dead Space Remake. Regardless of what difficulty setting the Dead Space Remake is tackled on, Isaac Clarke's expedition through the USG Ishimura is going to be a terrifying and challenging experience. For those looking to make this horror outing as nerve-shredding and traumatic as possible though, developers Motive Studios made that happen. After beating the game on any difficulty, players will unlock New Game Plus. Although this gives them access to upgraded suits and weapons, this mode maintains the taut level of sci-fi horror by introducing stronger and faster enemies in the form of the Phantom Necromorphs. Identified by their glowing red eyes, these monsters ensure the second time through the Ishimura never becomes a walk in the park. Moreover, if the game is beaten on hard mode, players will likewise unlock the ominously titled Impossible difficulty. With tougher enemies and scarcer ammo drops, this setting will put players' survival horror skills to the test. However, it's the permadeath mechanic that's the cruelest addition here, with one disturbingly graphic death causing players to try again from the start of the game. Choosing to play New Game Plus on Impossible is therefore the optimal way to experience Dead Space at its most harrowing level of challenge. Number 3, Mein Laban, Wolfenstein 2, The New Colossus. Even on its more merciful difficulties, Wolfenstein 2 isn't an easy game. It wears its crushing challenge on its sleeve by borderline mocking players for choosing the easier settings by naming them Can I Play Daddy and Don't Hurt Me. For those not wishing to be ridiculed by the difficulty select screen, the aptly named I Am Death Incarnate is there as the ultra hard option for the quote-unquote fearless gamer. This mode doesn't undersell the difficulty. Enemies are incredibly aggressive and even more accurate with their shots, able to take out Blazkowicz easily while tanking a ridiculous amount of damage before going down themselves. The punishment is so severe that some frustrated fans took to the internet to vent about its unfairness. But for those who managed to beat this mode, Wolfenstein 2 has one more challenge left, and that's Mein Laban. Unlocked only after beating the ultra hard mode, this level is essentially the same, but with saves now disabled. Die once and players will need to try it again from the very start. While it is possible to see this mode through to the end, with 0.02% of players unlocking the Mein Laban achievement, your sanity will be lost in the process. Number 2, Ultra Nightmare, Doom Eternal. There is no series in the history of gaming that's more fantastically and brilliantly over the top than Doom. With its visceral bloody violence, face-melting soundtrack, and punishing range of difficulty levels, the franchise is one of the most stylish and challenging shooters ever created. The recent Doom games have continued to build on the series' run-and-gun legacy, adding to both the violence and the difficulty, whereas the original game's difficulty settings ranged from the easier I'm Too Young to Die to the Fiendish Nightmare. The 2016 game introduced Ultra Nightmare, a mode so deviously demonic that none of the developers even managed to beat it. Unlike the already masochistic Nightmare mode where the slightest mistake is severely punished, Ultra Nightmare only allows players to save after each mission. This mode is so diabolical that the game even asks asked players to confirm if they're willing to put themselves through it. Ultra Nightmare returned for Doom Eternal, and it was made even tougher thanks to the faster combat and the addition of torturously tough enemies like the Marauder. In an extra cruel twist, players were locked into this setting, meaning that they'd need to start over again as punishment for admitting defeat. Suffice to say, Ultra Nightmare is not for the faint of heart. Number 1, give me God of War 2018. Alongside its epic plot and eye-widening visuals, one of the best parts of 2018's God of War is its combat. There aren't many things in video games that are as satisfying as slicing through enemies with Kratos' mighty axe. And while there's no shortage of challenge to be found here, especially when it comes to the optional boss fights, this game never felt unfair while playing on its standard difficulty levels. But if players would rather put themselves through an arduous test of skill and endurance, then they should select the Give Me God of War difficulty. Be prepared though, this difficulty can't be lowered after it's selected. This setting is intended only for veterans of the game who possess a deep understanding of its mechanics. Not only do enemies hit harder than before alongside having significant boosts to stun and other resistances, but they can now counter-attack much faster. Moreover, enemies can now turn elite during combat, giving them a massive boost to power as well as new attacks. On top of this, Kratos will no longer automatically move closer to enemies when he attacks, status effects last longer, and passive bonuses are also greatly reduced. In short, this mode is agonizingly difficult. Some video games are so difficult that you want to cheat, and some video games in fact want you to cheat, so check out that list which is on screen now, and also don't forget to leave a comment down below on your experiences with ultra hard difficulty modes. Like this video, subscribe, head over to WhatCulture.com for more content every day. I've been Si for WhatCulture, and have a good week.